while doctors know the illness the best, you know yourself the best, and the care plan should be customized to your values and preferences. What matters to you? These are things you want to bring forward. Because the standard care is what everybody on the conveyor belt will get, and maybe that's right for most people, but there are places where you can nip and tuck and make it uniquely you. And there are lots of decision points where you really should be bringing what's important to you forward. Hi, I'm Cian Xiao.
And I'm Sammy Winemaker. We talk about ways to put the human back at the center of care.
The Waiting Room Revolution starts right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Sammy, palliative care physician, and welcome back to season 10 of the Waiting Room Revolution podcast. Hi, Cian. Good to see you again.
Hi, Sammy.
My partner in this revolution. And hello to Kayla, one of the producers of the podcast, and Maggie, the other
Hello,
producer of this
everyone.
podcast.
Thanks for having us back.
Yeah. Okay, so just to remind people that this season, season 10, is all about revisiting the 7 keys that have been out and about that's a Canadian thing, out and about, for a couple of years now, and we're taking stock and reflecting on the 7 keys. Are there things we love about them? Are there things we would change about them? What have we learned? So last week we talked about know your style, and this week is about customize your order. It is key number 4. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks. So, Sian, why don't you remind us what this key, customize your order, is all about?
Okay, well, customize your order is the idea that while doctors know the illness the best, you know yourself the best, and the care plan should be customized to your values and preferences. What matters to you? These are things you want to bring forward. Because the standard care is what everybody on the conveyor belt will get, and maybe that's right for most people, but there are places where you can nip and tuck and make it uniquely you. And there are lots of decision points where you really should be bringing what's important to you forward.
Mhm. I
So
agree.
this sounds a little bit to me like advanced care planning. What's different about customize your order versus advanced care planning?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is some overlap. Advanced care planning is this idea of knowing yourself, what's most important to you, and what you wouldn't want to trade off, no matter what, and making that very clear to the person or people in your life who may in the future need to make a decision on your behalf if you're not able to make a healthcare decision. And these are discussions that should happen all throughout life, advanced care planning discussions, so that you're giving intel to people around you so that they know you so well that if a decision about your healthcare is required, that it's not about what they want for you, it's about knowing what you would have wanted yourself in that situation. But this idea of customize your order is all of that, but it's also about really knowing yourself so well and learning how to present you at every interaction with the healthcare system so that you protect yourself from being treated like just a standard or the average person, or what we say is sometimes like cog on the wheel, or a piece of equipment on the conveyor belt, a room number, just a diagnosis, an organ. Like, we are none of those things. We are individual humans, and unless we learn how to bring our values and what's important to us forward, we risk being treated just like the average. And I don't want to be the average. I want to be Sammy. So I need to learn how to customize every interaction I have with the healthcare system so that they know Sammy, not just this person.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, what I have my own perspective and what I've learned throughout these few years, because there's been a lot of overlap between advanced care planning and this whole idea of being prepared, because our whole revolution is about being activated and prepared, and there's a lot of similarities. But I think it's a disservice to think advanced care planning is really about telling people your wishes so someone else can make decisions for you when you can't speak for yourself. I really think the most important part of it, of preparing for future decision making is what you would do if that happens. Like what's important to you, and so you voice what's important to you. So yes, there may come a time when someone else has to make a decision for you, but there are many decisions where you're going to have to get a say. And if you don't think about this early, you're going to get the default, and it may not really be what you wanted.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm curious, what does it look like when someone does this well? Maybe Sammy.
Mhm. Well, I mean, you don't necessarily have to do it well. I'm thinking about a patient I just saw this week, and this person had had multiple hospitalizations back to back to back. And then one day in the hospital had it and just said, you know, get me out of here. I want to go home. And each time people came into her room, that's all she could say is, I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. Well, in a way, this is her exercising, customizing her order. The rest of them thought she should stay there because something about her situation was too unstable. But that wasn't her goal. Her goal was to get home. She had had enough with the hospital. She knew the risks and benefits, and she knew that what was most important to her was being in her own environment with her own things around her, where her family and friends could come and visit her at home. Um, and so I would say, at face value, it didn't look like, oh, she did that well, having, a full-on breakdown in the hospital, but she did it, right? And so sometimes it takes, a crescendoing moment to express yourself. But, other people I can think about, they, um, you know, tend to know themselves. I guess, I guess it's related to know your style as well, because I think there are just some people who naturally are so insightful about themselves that they do this quite naturally. This idea of bringing themselves forward. Their style might be to offer up themselves and bits and pieces about themselves just naturally. Like I talk about myself. So I don't think it would be a stretch for me to be able to express what's most important to me in a healthcare interaction, or but for other people it would be a struggle. And so I know being a little bit vague, Kayla, but the thing is that because everyone's different, I think there is no way, one way that this is going to look good. And this idea of customize your order and know your style are very much overlapping to me.
Yeah, and I think what does it look like? I think I can't we get this question a lot. We often think about how do we provide good care for, special populations, unique populations, vulnerable populations. And in a way, we've always struggled with that because customize your order, the ethos of that is whatever makes you special or unique, that's important to you to bring that forward. And so we do tons of education with providers and systems to make it more inclusive and acceptable. But really, if patients came right out and said, "This is what's important to me," or "You need to know this about me to provide good care," that is the way that care can be customized to all the different things that are important to you. And so you don't need a special way to do it. It should be the way we deliver personalized care. And I can think of one story. I remember, I think it was your story, Sammy, where there was somebody who was First Nations in the community. You should probably tell the story. But basically, the healthcare providers were having a tough time connecting with her. And when you walked in and you just sort of sat and listened, and she said the artwork, the indigenous artwork was very important to her. And it was her connection to her ancestors. And once when you walked into the home and they were able to, when you just commented on the artwork and started telling you about the indigenous art, that was the connection to allow her to open up and trust this that you and the system was going to be there to to support her. And that's all that it took. That the customizing your order for her was to recognize that for her, this was an important part of who she was, and to to make that connection of I trust that that we're going to be a good team and you're here to support me and not for some other reason.
Mhm. Mhm. It's good to know you listen when I tell you stories.
I try to remember them. And then that's why we have a lot of
Yeah.
podcast episodes.
Yeah, I feel like we do have there have been some stories about using this key and kind of what the result was, what the outcome was. I also think of in the training supporting the journey home, we learned from a healthcare provider about um, like if people are using traditional medicines, to ask about it because there can be some interactions with prescriptions, right? I just think that's a way to customize your order a little bit too. Um, any other stories that come to mind when we think about customize your order?
I mean, I have to say that the one guest, which and if you listen to this episode, it was the one where I felt the most uncomfortable, and you'll pick it up. But with Sammy and Jeff Myers, so Dr. Jeff Myers and all of us have, and his colleagues have been working. He thought of all of this work without using the words advanced care planning, which I think can be confusing or scary. And he really just talks about it as you're either preparing for future decision making or you're making a decision. So if you're not making a decision, every discussion you have about what's important to you and how you live your life is giving people intel into a future decision that they may need to make. And so we actually wrote a paper about it. It's published in Current Oncology, and we collaborated with Health Canada to create a one-page tool. It's free, it's on our website to help clinicians, but also patients and families think about, this whole all these forms that people might be scared to fill out. But at the end of the day, it's as simple as if there's not a decision to be made, we're preparing for future decision makings. And I use that language because I think it's much easier than trying to explain all the different legal terms that exist around this. And there are legal parts of it, of course, but it is really just at the end of the day, what are we asking people to do? We're asking them to think about what's important to them.
But you said why it was very uncomfortable. You're
Oh, it was uncomfortable because Jeff, if you remember, he put me on the spot and was asking me questions about my advanced care plan, and I was just the way he was I had not thought about the questions in the way that he asked them. But if you and I think at the end of the day, what I took away from that is he asked me things like, "What does a perfect day look like for you?" and that kind of thing. And I wasn't sure that I've ever thought about it like that. But at the end of the day, I don't know if we need to think about it in that way. It seems so like I'm close to the end, and I think we just need to think about what's important to us. That makes sense to me. And if I can communicate that, or if I think about what's important to my partner, then that is giving me intel into a future decision if I need to make. But that's it. It doesn't have to be any more scary than that. Whereas I think sometimes we frame these questions and it's very scary for people.
What's another episode that that really that people could listen to know a little bit more about customize your order? Sian?
Yeah, yeah. The other one that really stands out is our friend Claire Fuller from the UK, and she has a podcast called Advanced Care Planning Discussions, and she has a website, Speak for Me. But she really spends the whole podcast talking about advanced care planning, really, and guests and patients, families, clinicians of why it's important, and beautiful stories or heart-wrenching stories of when things go well and not so well. But she has put out a framework. It's on our website, and it's called Getting Your House in Order. That's how she thinks about advanced care planning. And we love metaphors, of course. But in the house, really, it's as simple as what's important to you. That's one of the windows. What you want, what you don't want, and who is important to you. And then there's just one tiny window about end of life choices and decisions. So I love that it emphasizes not just about end of life decisions, but really just the whole care journey. And it starts with what's important to you and who's important to you, because that is uh, what this is really all about. And I love the idea of getting your house in order, like and revisiting when you do spring cleaning and things like that, because that just takes away some of the scary questions that you get about do you want to be resuscitated and tubes and this. And I know those are important for lots of reasons, but at the end of the day, everyday people, I think, are more likely to engage in discussions about what gives their life meaning rather than, very specific conversations that always have some element of, well, it depends around it. So
Mhm.
I think Claire's episode and she and her podcast are great.
I think
Mhm.
we're just again mentioning the why, is not just about decision making. That in this current healthcare system, the system values efficiency, productivity, sameness, homogeneous, all of these kinds of things. And unless you bring yourself forward in the ways that, have been described already as a patient and caregiver, you're going to feel like you're part of like a zombie lineup or a conveyor belt. That it's just as important to think of customize your order and know your style, the last episode, as ways that you can say, this is me as an individual. Because at the end of an illness journey, which is where I meet lots of people, because just that's the way the healthcare system is set up, it is the number one thing that I hear that is causing people so much suffering, which is I don't recognize myself anymore. I don't feel that I have worth. I feel helpless. I feel hopeless. I feel detached from who I am as a person. All that we're talking about today is more than just making decisions or someone making decisions for you. It is to ensure that you feel like you the entire way from the diagnosis forward, that you hang on to you, and that the people around you hang on to themselves as well. We are unique, and we want to feel that way.
It's interesting. So as a mom, I feel like I use this key a lot, right? When I'm advocating for my kids, when I take them to the emergency room or I take them to the doctor, and the doctor says one thing and I say, "Well, you know what? I don't know because I think that as a mom, I know something is wrong with my child and I'm not leaving until you do more tests, and I feel like I embrace this key and I don't just settle for traditional conveyor belt care where they're just going to send me home and I have to bring my child back the next day. So this key has actually been super helpful for me in caring for my kids. So that leads me to a question for you is that you said that customize your order and know your style are kind of similar. So what happens when someone's customize your order might not necessarily agree with what the family member thinks that they should do?
Hmm. Okay. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say that customize your order does not mean that you can demand whatever you want.
Right.
So we need to make
Mhm.
that clear. It's not carte blanche. You can't just say, well, you know what? I'm going to customize my order. I want a private room. I want to have, nursing come to my home overnight. Like that is not the case, just to be clear. But again, Maggie, it goes back to um, appreciating right from the get-go that a patient, a person, and the people in their life that are going to be most affected by their illness and go along with them, um, that there is this appreciation that everyone is different and that
Mhm.
the patient with the diagnosis is going to want to customize their order to whatever is most important to them. But it is fair that the people around them will also want to customize their order, in their role as caregiver or illness manager or gopher who's going to get things. That everyone counts in an illness journey. Some people um, refer to it as, you know, a sport, that you're all on a team together and the whole team counts. I don't really like using the sporting metaphor, but everyone does count. And again, this is all about, giving a spotlight to these important things that allow people to be not in the dark, remember, but in the know. And so we have harnessed all of this from all of our research and stories from the bedside and offering it now to people who hopefully can embody these concepts right from the beginning. Um, so if people are on different pages around customize your order, what do you guys think?
I think it's what we've been talking about, that things it's a discussion. This is not
There's no
it's
right
not
or
black
wrong.
or white. Yeah, there's no right or wrong. It's not black or white. I think it's about making sure that you focus on what's important to the patient, seeing them as a person and not just, a widget on the conveyor belt. And I think there are some really important examples or stories of how as the illness changes and people change, or their how their adapting changes, like their values and wishes stay the same but come out in different ways. And I think you know I I wonder how much in your clinical practice, um, sort of I'm just thinking about, customize your order is really about how people sort of, make these wishes known or say this is important to me, but as like hope evolves and the illness evolves, how those values play out also evolves. How they want to stay independent doesn't look the same as they go through their illness. And I think that's not a betrayal of customize your order. That's actually an adaptation of making sure we are honoring that person and allowing them as much as they are able to make decisions for themselves. And I think that's what we it's so important about the difference between advanced care planning and say an advanced directive. But not to get into all that, but just there's just so many beautiful stories of how when things progress, the time that they have, their hope evolves and they can adapt and change and it's always focusing on what's important to them.
Yeah, I think you're alluding very clearly to this idea that nothing is static. And this is a moving landscape being in an illness, right? And there are things about you as a person that are probably going to stay resilient and steady throughout. As they say, you die as you live. But people at the same time do reshuffle, reorganize, reprioritize things that they value, depending on the situation they're in, the chapter that they're in at that time. So customize your order is not a one-off thing. It is this idea of being able to convey what's important to you at the time that you need to when you are interacting with the healthcare system so that they treat you or that you that things go according to what you are hoping for as a person instead of as a patient or again as an organ or a diagnosis. I think that I'm often in a position of being the bad cop sometimes in people's homes because sometimes I have to say, even to a patient who's trying to customize their order around something, that, that this is a family affair, that hopefully decisions are made with, everyone in mind if it's possible. I'm going back to the example, I think, Maggie, that you gave about someone not wanting to have PSWs in their home, personal support
Mhm.
workers, healthcare aides. Um,
Mhm.
again, we want to respect the right of someone who's making that decision. They're customizing their order, but it's also important for them to understand how their decision affects the people around them, and
Mhm.
that customizing your order might not always go off smoothly to the people around. And ideally, we sort of form some kind of co-negotiation or consensus that hopefully meets everyone's needs to a degree instead of only one person's needs.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think those are some of the commonly asked questions we've answered in our workbook, that we've sort of touched on, so which is great. And I think I just keep reminding myself of what we another one of our goals, which is to try to set up patients and families for success. And what do we say to providers? Like, what advice do you have for providers to better integrate this key without them feeling that it's going to take up so much time?
Yeah, I think you simply just want to ask often. I will borrow from Harvey Chachanoff, a distinguished professor from Winnipeg, who he is a psychiatrist and done lots of research. And just the one question of what do I need to know about you to be able to provide you the best care? I mean, it's just a simple question. And that is giving people an invitation, to say, oh, okay. well, this is what I need you to know then. And that's sort of setting the stage for customizing your order.
Yeah, that's great advice. I
It's
think that's yeah, I think that's a great place to leave things off. I know we're at time. So thank you, Kayla, Maggie. We'll pick up on the next key next week.
Thank you for listening. The workbook, Applying the 7 Keys for Navigating a Life-Changing Diagnosis, is available at select retailers now. Visit our website, waitingroomrevolution.com, for more details. On the website, you can also find free resources, event listings, learn more about the movement, and you can join our newsletter, which is the best way to keep up with everything Waiting Room Revolution. This episode was produced by Maggie Sivak, Cien Ciao, Kayla McMillan, and Shilpa Jyothi Kumar. Our theme music is Maypole by Ketsa.